Hi, Hanneli.
Good afternoon.
And hi, Heidi.
Hello.
Hi. So how are you guys today?
Still warm.
Yeah, it's a little, well, it's not that warm here. It's a little overcast.
I'm still like this, and outside. So.
Still in summer clothes, yeah. Well, it's still summer here too. And Hanneli probably is in the middle of winter.
Mm.
Oh, you muted yourself, Hanneli. You clicked the opposite.
It is the opposite. It was very interesting that, hello everyone first.
Hi.
All. I had a most beautiful encounter this morning with a dear friend of mine from the UK. And we were speaking about, he was also showing me that it doesn't look too bad outside in the UK, wherever he is there. And he said, then we spoke about my temperature here where I am. And we're in winter, and when it's 19 degrees for us, it's freezing. So it is very interesting when people in Europe say they're so hot. For us, that's not hot. But when for us it's 19 degrees, we are freezing. But it's very interesting when I travel to your parts of the world, I'm not cold at all. So it's in winter now. So it's very interesting how our bodies perceive things very differently because of our minds, of our mind, our association with, it's very cold if it's 19 degrees, whereas when you're in Europe and it's -2, you're not cold. So it's just one of those interesting things. Hello, Doug.
Hi, Doug. Yeah, it's kind of odd, and also how you perceive it. In most of Europe, at least Northern Europe, because the weather changes so much. The moment there's a little bit of sunshine, it gets celebrated right away. People will be outside in the park sunbathing, and even if it's going to rain later, you grab the opportunity right away, which is weird if you lived in a place where there's sunshine every day. Like I lived in LA for many years, and sunshine was kind of boring because it was always there. Anyway, hello, Doug.
Hello. To what do we owe the candle?
Just that was already there in my mixer app, so I like the candle. That's just it's always good to have a lighted candle. I need to not get too close, then I burn my, oh, this is my ear.
Yeah.
This ear is getting a little close. Well, I'm actually moving the wrong direction, but that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, I've also got a candle here next to me that's on. I actually must grab it. I'm going to grab it as well.
It's good to have a candle. So anyway, I'm back home. My car is still, oh, that's a nice candle. It's better with a real live one. So I'm back home. My car is still 200 miles away. I'll probably leave it there, and it's not worth it to repair it. It costs thousands to replace the clutch. But anyway, that's an opportunity to change things a little bit. It was actually only stressful today where I had to make some decisions about it. Otherwise, it went rather smoothly all by itself. Anyway, today the experiment today is a game of threes. The idea is, some of you might have done something similar, but the idea is that one picks three totally different things, like preferably from different categories, different kinds of things. Could be an object, could be a thing you heard, could be a certain feeling or situation, and they should preferably be as far away from each other as possible. and they could be meaningful. It's best if they have some kind of personal value of some kind, or we all kind of recognize what it is. But the exercise is then that we make those three things relate to each other in a meaningful way. And it's often surprising the amount of meaning you find out of seemingly random things if you pretend that they aren't random. Oh, that's a cool candle. Wow. And I'm mysterious. I like it. You just had a candle in your pocket there. You know, that's very cool. So, wow. We will all fight a light there.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
No, that was very good. So I think you get the idea that if we assume that it's meaningful, it usually turns out to be, and actually we end up somewhere we couldn't consciously have chosen. And sometimes that's more productive than talking about the most important issues we can think of, strangely. So, I mean, we can start in various ways. I noted down a few sets of threes of some ridiculously different kinds of things that just popped into my head. So we can use some of those. We can see how far we go. It doesn't mean we use the whole meeting for that, but we can maybe try several different ones, or we can see if we end up somewhere interesting with it. If not, we can choose some other methods of getting random things. Like I also like, for example, like sets of cards or objects that you have, and things you have lying around that are somehow meaningful, that you can say something about. And so all of these things is stuff we can do something with. But let's
also on the internet there is a random word generator. You could do, I did that for a while, wrote 6 out of 10 random words. That was fun.
Yeah, so that's great. And also one can, I mean, the earliest version of this I know is like, just if you need some creative ideas, pick the dictionary, find 2 random places, put your finger there, see what the words are, and then make them fit together no matter what. And you like very quickly are inventing new things that didn't exist, and it's really cool. Okay, so we'll just say hello to Gina first. Hi, Gina. You're in the dark. No, there you are. Hi, Gina. Can you hear us? Hi. Okay, so we're about to start the exercise of the day, which is to a game of threes. I'm gonna pick 3 totally different kinds of things, and we will have a little conversation about that. If we run out of juice on that, we'll find another way of finding some other 3, and we'll see where that goes. And there's no saying on where that will go. We'll see. So I have 3 different things that I picked. I don't know how I picked them, but anyway, I'll copy them to the chat also. Where's the chat? There's the chat. Okay, so the first item is rocket fuel. Rocket fuel, that's some kind of substance. Then there's a quote: "The essence of tyranny is the denial of complexity." It's one of my favorite quotes. It's by Jacob Burckhardt. I forgot who he is, but it's a good quote. I'll be happy to explain it if necessary. And the last thing is a rainy Sunday afternoon, whatever that means. So hello, Peter. So the idea is that these are now the 3 things. They're sort of in different categories, and we will proceed as if that's totally meaningful, that these 3 belong together, and we'll see where that goes. And I will say the first thing that strikes me about rocket fuel as opposed to other types of fuel is it could be in different forms. Like whereas jet fuel, that's always like sort of liquid, is a thing you put on like a gas at a gas station. But rocket fuel could be other things. Some rockets use solid fuel, and it's more sort of a material packed into a tube, or it could be a gas, or it could be something liquid. It could be basically anything that makes a rocket go would be rocket fuel. It could be gunpowder.
The rocket fuel of the future, maybe on a rainy Sunday afternoon, we will find it out, is out of air. It is the 0-point energy. And the tyranny of today is the denial of this complexity, because we think everything as we know it is right, but there are much more than we ever have known. And this new way of sending rockets into the air, the new rocket fuel, is already existing. But the tyranny of contemporary power structures let us be in a rainy and a very dark afternoon eternally, until finally science has found out, not has found out, the economic interests are not so strong enough to suppress anymore what is already in existence. So something like that.
Okay, yeah. Now, I think actually one thing that rainy Sunday afternoons are for me, I mean, that could be a sad thing, but it could also be sort of, well, it's raining outside and you don't have much to do particularly. So it's a good time to sort of hang around inside and play a game or change the world or invent something new. It's sort of, nobody's expecting you to be anywhere or do anything in particular, so your creativity sort of comes out. That's a time when you sort of come up with something that you maybe wouldn't have come up with otherwise. And I think everybody has some kind of version of rainy Sunday afternoons where you're just sitting around waiting for the bus, or there's nothing happening, or the appointment you had that got canceled, so you have an hour or two with nothing much to go on. And you can sort of pick up some pieces you didn't get around to picking up otherwise, and do something with them, and then potentially use them as some kind of fuel to go somewhere better.
Well, lounging around on a rainy Sunday afternoon, it's the most amazing time to get your imagination rock fueled, that we can explore different possibilities of how to approach this denial of complexity, so that everyone's ideas are visible and being heard, and at the same time just presencing and allowing that rocket fuel to ascend down on us in other ways for the week that comes, which will bring about a lot of creativity and vitality to rest before the Blue Mondays begins.
And you know, the denial of complexity, one sort of pretends that things happen in a particular way that everybody agrees on, that this is the correct way or this is the authoritative way, but really there's so many more ways that things can happen. I mean, rocket fuel is not necessarily just something that's really expensive that sort of NASA puts into a really expensive rocket, and then if you have $100 million, you can fire that off to the moon or something. Not necessarily. I mean, there might be a totally other types of fuel which are not based on this authoritative power structure and financing where somebody needs to use really expensive materials. There might be something that a group of people might put together on a rainy Sunday afternoon that might be equally effective. I mean, one might be looking in the wrong place. That, like, to go places, you need financing and years of scientists that are building something really important and expensive and very, very fragile. Whereas potentially there could be something really more sturdy, more complex, like nature doesn't require financing or scientists. It just sort of grows and builds things and everything, oceans and mountains and rainforests, that all sort of appears rather effortlessly. And there's plenty of rocket fuel going into creating that, but nobody needs to put a bill in front of Congress to finance NASA or anything to do that. It just sort of happens in the small, and rather more in the atmosphere of rainy Sunday afternoons. You need some rain and you need some time, and things just sort of grow into something complex that works and that goes to new places. So it might be a more powerful system and something that's maybe easier to participate in than sort of waiting around for somebody to invent the right rocket.
Well, I'd have to say that there was a time when I really didn't like rainy Sunday afternoons, mostly because I didn't know what to do with my kids, and my husband was usually at sea. So to me, they often lasted much longer than I was really interested in them lasting. So dinner was actually, phew, we made it to dinner. I'd say, not so much now. I mean, children are growing up, and rainy Sunday afternoons seems to be a time to slow down and to be contemplative. And in BC at the moment, with all our forest fires, we could use a couple rainy Sunday afternoons. But the times my positive times were when we actually got together with friends on those Sunday afternoons with our spouses or just with our kids. And then we'd talk about something, and we wouldn't talk about anything that was, so complex, but we would always feel like we were solving one of the world's problems when we got together over endless cups of coffee or tea. And from that, we didn't want Sunday afternoon to end. So, I can make a much more pleasurable thing out of that. The thing about the essence of tyranny for me is, first of all, Fleming, I loved your comment on nature, because one of the things I think I find so amazing is the complexity of nature and how clever nature is. So much more clever than we are. And yet we try to come up with a single answer because we only want to think about something for the 7 or 8 seconds that our attention span's been reduced to. So something as simple, I'll stay on my forest fire thing, is that our logging companies seem to think, cut down a fir tree, plant a fir tree, cut down a fir tree, plant a fir tree. This is not what the ecosystem in any way intended. The ecosystem wanted deforestation to happen on a basis of natural powers. So lightning strikes, which would burn down a type of forest which had been created over time with different maturities. And the very first thing that would come out of a forest fire is something here called fireweed, which is a very pretty plant, by the way, which would create this beautiful meadow of purple. And then it would be sitting there in the ground, dormant all this time. And yet, the moment the rocket fuel got all over it, it got its own little rocket fuel out, and it grew this wild fireweed. Okay. And then the trees came in the order that was correct for the trees to make the next forest. Something about that.
So I'm trying to think of what these 3 things have to do with us here. Like, why are they particularly relevant to us here? I mean, we're kind of meeting on a rainy Sunday afternoon, which has maybe been artificially created. It's on a Wednesday morning for some of you, afternoon here. It's not that I don't have other things to do, but
and not rainy.
And it's not even rainy. But it's for me a sort of artificially created safe space for an hour where we pretend we're just sort of hanging around and seeing what we want to do, but not just because we're bored, but which I don't think we are in any way, but more for the other two, like rocket fuel. In part, it could be to go somewhere, to do something that it needs to take off. I wanted to ignite and go places, and also to build or participate in some kind of complexity that actually goes places, that we're hanging around here in order to be complex and to be part of a bigger complex system, which hopefully can go places, and that hopefully the fuel for that is not something we need to go externally and find somewhere, or that we're going to order at Target, but that we're going to that somehow us being ourselves and being together and being complex as we are, that somehow will fuel it, as it does in nature. There's a rainy Sunday afternoon on a red bench. That's lovely. So I'm hoping that just us being together and sort of being in the right way, or in whatever we call it, will be a fuel in itself to grow and scale complexity, even though complexity doesn't probably think of it that way. I mean, I don't think there's anything in nature that sits and thinks about scaling things, but nature scales really well. I mean, very small things connect with very big things. Mountains in part happen because very small things happen in other places. Geological layers have a lot to do with biological activity at other times. It all connects together. Anyway, so I was just saying that it seems to connect quite meaningfully with what we are doing here.
I'm thinking about the essence of tyranny. As you wrote it, as the denial of complexity. Yes, it is. But how can we use, I mean, we could think about it now on our artificial Sunday, rainy Sunday afternoon. How actually can we stick to the complexity we are creating, we are aware of, and we are living, to how to help the gems of tyranny to wither. So with other words, how can lived complexity really have an influence or be the rocket fuel to avoid tyranny, or to, let's say, to combat even tyranny, instead of being overthrown from tyranny? You know, this dilemma. So that's what I'm wondering, because as soon as tyranny is established, it costs a lot of exactly those people as we think we are, a lot of lives to change that again. So in my opinion, we need to be very aware and use our love for complexity to really recognize the beginnings of tyrannical tendencies and go against it, instead of saying, yeah, maybe it will pass by, something like that.
I think it starts even very small. I mean, it's not even necessarily talking about the tyranny of like government leaders that are fascists and so forth, but even the simple things of in our gathering here together, there are many ways we might deny complexity and just sort of fall back to an artificial simplicity. And it happens actually kind of whenever we try to push it. I mean, if one of us is like, okay, now enough of this talk, we need to like decide, we need to agree on what to do here. I mean, that's a well-intended thing to decide that, well, this is not going anywhere. We need to decide something, but that's denying complexity. That's like, okay, enough of this complexity. It's confusing what all of you people are on about. Let's just decide. And that takes many forms. It's like, okay, let's decide who's the leader, or what do you really want to do? I mean, you got to express really what's your thing. And put it in one sentence, and we like put it on a website, then we got it. I mean, all of that is well-intentioned ways of getting things moving that we all participate in various ways, and people try to move it forward. But the majority of those ways, or a lot of them, are really denying the complexity. It's like, let's cut away all the stuff we don't know what is, and let's just agree on this is what we're doing. We're following this philosophy, or we have this name, or this is our mission statement. So the question is how to, what do we do instead? I mean, how do we hold the complexity? Because also there, somebody will show up with a clever system for how to manage complexity. Like, there will surely be somebody who will say, well, it's easy. All complexities just falls into 5 categories. We just need to do this and that. It's hard to hold or witness complexity without getting lost in oversimplifying it into something that becomes a tyranny. And I think we humans are a little challenged in that. We're sort of smart. At the same time, we're sort of stupid. I mean, we do tend to end up with these oversimplifications. We think about it and we go like, I have the solution. This is what we're going to do. And then we try to persuade other people to go with our solution. We almost don't even know how to do it. Although I think we have some clues of how to deal with it. That's what I think is interesting.
Yeah, and what comes immediately to me when you say that, can also complexity become a tyranny? In the sense, when the complexity is too complex, then it brings you chaos, total chaos. And that can become sort of a tyrannical aspect to your life, because you cannot orient yourself anymore. Just a question. If we really need sometimes a certain restriction of complexity to, let's say, to survive, because otherwise we cannot take in infinite factors at the same time. So, you know, if you insist on maximum complexity, I think that can fall over into a sort of tyranny too.
I agree, because I think that sometimes we end up understanding complexity as just sort of a long list of things. Or so like one example of that would be if we want to make sure that we hear everybody's opinion about everything, so we spend enough time to hear what each of us here thinks about everything, and then we try to catalog that and make sort of add it all up to make sure we accommodate everybody's opinions and needs and feelings and everything. That's again very well intentioned, but it ends up then being complicated. It takes a long time, and once we're done, we probably, I mean, we might be a little bit further, but we haven't really done it. So again, going back to nature, I mean, in nature, there's nobody who's like trying to pull everybody, every little plant and animal and amoeba, what it wants, and trying to sort of fit it all together. I mean, it just sort of, it's all present at the same time. It all sorts of flows. And that's the kind of complexity we we have a hard time with. We tend to, even when we try to deal with the complexity, we try to then sort of understand it and write it down and make an org chart of what is it really, which isn't what it is. So, I mean, I don't have the answer either. I mean, I can see where it's not working, and I can see partial answers, and sometimes just sort of being there, being quiet and not trying to solve it, but just hear or express where we're at. That's moves us forward sometimes better than trying to like accommodate it somehow.
And I have to come in again, this sort of complexity which you call is nature doing or having, is requiring then from us to really be in a receptive space, not think about it, and just be in the insecurity practically, because you don't know what nature does in the next moment. And I think the human instinct is to try to understand nature to be safe. So complexity, yes, but if it is the ideal, that's the other thing, because we have our rocket-fueled mind who wants to understand and get things right. And I think it has some sense. And only the existence, as I see with animals, for instance, that they are just being part of nature, I think we are not meant to be that. There are other creatures to be that. And so I'm really asking myself if this is what we are needing to go to, you know, to be part of nature in this sense. Because otherwise, why would we have got this thing here? So.
And I think, like you're saying, Heidi, I think in some ways, like we've been trying to say, well, you know, what is our purpose? What is our quest? What are we trying to achieve? What great thing can we do? But again, we're back to this, we're all these little particles coming together, and maybe we just can't see this picture yet. And if we get too close, we might see some aspect. We stand back, we might see a different one. So I think if we accept that there is complexity, if we're not tyrants ourselves, we don't like people who don't accept complexity because they give us simple, quick answers and solve our problems in the blink of an eye, or apparently signing their name on something. But if we can accept complexity as it comes to us, we don't need to seek it out. We just need to start something and then see where it takes us. And as you said, if different people have different viewpoints, which I hope we would, we can look at the same thing and see it very differently and appreciate it very differently and see where that takes us. I think that the fun thing about this group is we're trying to figure it out, but I don't know if we're too close or too far away. But if we accept that it's going to be complex, it's probably worth doing.
So yeah, go ahead, Hanali.
No, I just want to share what happened with my hand while you were all speaking. I don't know, this happened subconsciously. I was not even really aware of my hand because I was just present with you as you each was sharing about this. And I really don't know the meaning behind it either, but I think it links to the tyranny part. My hands start cramping up. My right hand, which is the real doing hand, naturally speaking. And it's painful. It's extremely painful. So it's very interesting how my body's responding to what I'm present to. But I can link it directly to the tyranny part because I live on a continent where tyranny is our everyday life. It might not be like that for you guys, but for us, it's a reality. But it's very interesting what happened with us in terms of, especially that quote, is that we became sensitized to it. And what I mean by that is that for us, it's not a big thing anymore. So we accepted it and we live our lives in whatever way we want to anyway. So the tyranny is not really, we're not making it a big thing. And we have a very complex society here because of all the different, our past and all the different things that we have to deal with from different cultural point of views. And now suddenly my hand opens up. And they suddenly flow again. But it's very interesting that when one comes from an environment where there is, tyranny for many, many decades in different forms, that it's not that you deny the complexity, you should just learn how to navigate it. And for me, that is how, especially here, if I travel, I experience it differently. But here, we become sensitized. So it's not that it's such a big issue for us anymore, although we accept that different people have different answers to whatever is happening. And we're not trying to fight each other. And yet there was luckily no bloodshed in the last 25 years, which, if you really think about it, should have happened. But it didn't. And I think that is the other part of dealing with something like tyranny and complexity together. And I also realized that over the past 2 decades, in South Africa specifically, that created a lot of, the way we're dealing with it and navigating it created a lot of rocket fuel for us to do different innovative things and come out of the box. Where before, when that tyranny was not so visible, people didn't have to be innovative. They existed. They didn't even really live. So the rainy Sunday afternoon then became actually sunshine, which is very interesting how we navigated here. Because if you really look at it logically, there should have been a lot of bloodshed. And still now, especially now again, we're going through something similar again. Because we have a new, our government head's new. So now suddenly my hand is straight, the clamps are gone. So of course, that was very interesting.
I was wondering where you live because I didn't understand which country you were talking about.
Yeah, South Africa is my home country, but I travel a lot. But South Africa is my home country.
Well, there are two things. One is to respond to what you're saying, like just the observation that in nature there kind of isn't any tyranny. I mean, if in, not that it's all perfect, like in nature, if somehow there's some huge organism or something that's dominating some particular area, or there's a mountain there, or there's a huge whale or something, then everybody just sort of adjusts to it. I mean, nobody's going to go and fight the whale and say, well, you shouldn't be a whale. You shouldn't go around here eating all the fish. I mean, it sorts itself out. Everybody else just sort of fits in. Like some fish will naturally decide to swim along the whale and eat some of what the whale doesn't eat or something. And nobody seems to really have any problem with it, which is different to us humans. Like we have all sorts of mental issues with it. We don't just fit in. I mean, particularly now in our modern world, we feel that we have a choice, or there's something we could or should do. In earlier parts of our history, one has just sort of adjusted to it, like as a king, and there's like a duke, and then there's like the rich people, and I'm just a poor peasant, so I just do what a poor peasant will do. And you don't necessarily have second thoughts about whether that's right. I mean, that's a rather modern idea that I can decide that this is not right, we need to do something. Back in earlier times, the way I understand it, at least, there was more sort of, when the thought didn't necessarily come up that it should be different, even if you're very low on the totem pole. So there's to some degree an answer to that we create a lot of sort of resistance and problems about things that maybe we could just sort of flow with. It doesn't mean we shouldn't want to change them, but sometimes the resistance just creates a lot of stress that didn't necessarily need to be there. So there's a lesson from nature, I think, and also some kind of lesson from earlier parts of our own evolution, maybe. And actually related to that was my other point. I hate giving several points after each other, but the sort of like, where does the personal rocket fuel fit into it? I mean, we could say that one answer to things is just sort of let go, and there's like in nature, everything just sort of happens. But and we have certain philosophies that sort of go in that direction, to just be sort of Buddhist about it and just let everything be and just let go of all your desires and everything and just allow things to be. And there's a lot of sanity in that, but at the same time, I would like to want something. I would like to have desires. I would like to make things happen. So that's more like the rocket fuel. And that's one thing that maybe makes humans a little different, although I insist pretty much anything in nature wants something. I mean, animals are very obsessed about the few things that they want to do. There's lots of other things they don't care about, but they are really obsessed about eating and procreating and protecting their area and stuff. I mean, nobody can say anything else. So we humans have more complex desires. We want to change the world or leave a mark on it and live meaningful lives. And we haven't yet learned how to really be at peace with that. So to own our own desires, or pick some good desires that actually are possible or meaningful. So we end up getting a lot of stress about that. But it's still a little bit of a puzzle to me. How does that fit into just sort of letting everything be complex? Like sometimes we end up with just this sort of passive way of dealing with it, that, okay, it's all fine, it's okay, which is okay for our peace of mind. But at the same time, I would like to also be able to have burning passions of making things happen without at the same time making everybody else wrong about not having the same passions or seeing the same things. It's part of the complexity that we want stuff.
Yeah, and this is the sort of meta complexity, to be able to hold the difference aspects. That means that you have desires on one side and you also want to achieve something, and at the same time, or maybe not exactly the same time, but a part of you, yeah, maybe it's the same time, a part of you has the opposite, or the other ideas of letting go and so on. And I think holding complexity inside a personality, inside a person more than personality, is to be aware that we have all these parts, and there are times for the one to be let's say in action, even if it's not action, and there are times for the other one to be in action. And there's not only two, there are hundreds, but so complexity on the meta level.
And also, yeah, so avoiding the temptation for turning any of it into tyranny. I mean, the moment I decide, maybe if I discover being a vegan and I decide that's best for the planet, and of course we should never eat animals, it's cruel to the animals, they use a lot of resources, that's all very, very meaningful. It's not what I've chosen, but it's very meaningful. But if I decide that, and I decide, well, that's what we're going to do, and then I spend all my energy on convincing other people to be vegans too, because it's best for the planet and everything, I very easily turn that into a tyranny. And then it's the answer to everything. Every meeting we have, it will be about being vegan, which there are people that are like that. So somehow we need to allow for that we each might choose different things, and that's perfectly cool. It doesn't mean that needs to be our shared desire or outcome. It's cool. We'd like to hear it. I want to hear other people's desires, but I don't want to spend all the time on them persuading me that it's the right one. I mean, I have different ones. I'd like to liberate them and strengthen them and be better at sharing them, but part of the complexity is that we're all a little different. It's lovely when we share something, but a lot of the time we're just different, and that's cool.
What I was saying is the same thing which you now say from many people, is in yourself, not to be a tyrant to yourself. and accept the diversity that you one day are this way and the other day you are this way. If there is still a consistency, you know, if you get really crazy, schizophrenia or something, that's not what I mean. But to not be, as you said, with the vegan thing. Now I'm vegan, I'm not. But, you know, and now forever I have to be, even if there are other insights that say it's not even so healthy. No, I have decided that. So that's what I mean with being a tyrant to yourself, which is not a good idea. And we Germans have that a little bit, you know, so I had to learn this.
You know, it's interesting what came up while he was sharing now, both of you, Fleming and Adeline, is a wise man had this metaphor where he used, when you like the camel, when you're like sleeping, you're not awake yet, and then suddenly you become the lion, you roar, you wake up, and then suddenly you become the lion, you roar, and you tell the whole world about it. Just links into what you shared now, Fleming, as well. That you tell everybody that tyrant thing can easily come in, but you're so excited you want to tell the whole world now of this awakening of you, and you want to get everybody on board. But the next level is the play part, where the child comes. So it's from the camel to the roaring lion to the playful child. And in terms of what you both just shared, in terms of tyranny, I link it back to what I shared earlier about you navigating what's happening without getting attached to it. You're not denying it, but you're not getting attached to it. And the action part is exactly, the fuel part's exactly there, because you navigate through, but your focus is not on the tyranny. Your focus is on what you bring in, but it's playful. It's not that you don't have to convince anybody. You just do, like you say, I mean, you follow your desires and you do what you do, and you actually appreciate that others have other desires, and they see the world differently. Which I don't know why, but it just brings me back to coexistence again, that we can coexist in a very complex society without a tyranny. And still use the jet fuel, that as rocket fuel for ourselves to realize our dreams. But I also just want to share another perspective on Fleming, on that action part that you spoke about earlier. It becomes for me more and more clear in my perspective, in my world, that not doing something physically necessarily is not being passive. The opposite is not being of when I'm in a creative space. I might not do something physically, but there's a lot of beingness happening. In that beingness, a lot of creativity. A lot of that jet fuel is busy, you know, there's combustion going on all the time. But I'm not yet doing anything outside, you know, like physically outside. But without that, the action can't come, because that fuels it and that actually directs it as well. So there's that part of it too, but it's not being passive. Passive is to just do nothing. I'm not talking about that type of inaction.
So I think there are ways of sort of taking off, which is part of what I'm talking about, like how to take off in your own rocket, like that. This is what drives me, what I want to do. There are ways of doing that without insisting that everybody else comes along, or that everybody else helps fuel and build my rocket and pays attention to where I'm going. I mean, everybody else has their own rockets or things to do. So the ideal is that we can all take off without it becoming any kind of tyranny of attention or power or anything else. And that's also a little bit the puzzle, like how can we all be really engaged without demanding that everybody else has to listen to all our stuff all the time? Because that's usually what we want. If I'm really engaged in something, I have a million things to say about it every day. And even if I'm not trying to convince anybody, it would be tiring for everybody else to listen to everything I have to say. I might have a new thought about it every few seconds. I want to write down, I want to talk about it for hours. And that's great. It's not that one shouldn't have that, but we need a way of existing together where that's cool. It doesn't bother anybody else that I am taking off on a rocket, because you probably are too. With a substrate of complexity between us, if it doesn't have to be one or the other, there's room for billions of rockets taking off. They don't have to all go to the same place. They all take off from the surface. It's fine. And yeah, we'd like some network between us, but so just the vision that, of course, that's possible. We should all be able to take off and remain ourselves and complex and controlling our own attention. We don't have to tire out anybody else, even though we're taking off. But it's kind of fun to see where everybody else is headed, and everybody doesn't have to take off at the same time either. There's no obligation to be on a rocket. There are many other things to do. And it's perfectly all right to just hang around on a rainy Sunday afternoon and see what's happening, or just take a nap or read a book or play a game or something. It can all be part of the same thing. It shouldn't be convincing other people that now you have to take off and find your own escape velocity. I mean, yeah, I like that, but I mean, it's not a must. It's probably in part fueled by having rainy Sunday afternoons where nothing much is going on, and where you can just talk about it and idly explore new things. So it can all fit together in some system.
So I would bring together us who we are here, and I want to be a little bit tyrannical. And I ask myself if this is tyranny or if it is a desire, and if the person who is listening to that sees this as tyranny. So what I'm saying now is, I'm really interested about this not rainy, not Sunday afternoon of today, but the rocket fuel of Doug is today.
So that's a perfect question. So yeah, so the rocket fuel to me isn't actually anything to do with humans doing. It has to do with humans being, and it's emotional. So, generally the rocket fuel in my state of being, place, orientation is it coming out of love or is it coming out of fear? Because those are sort of the two base source colors emotionally to paint from. And the tyranny as the enemy of complexity, to me, is, God gave us this gray thing that sits on top of our shoulders, and we've just been running amok with it because there's no manual and nobody's trained us how to actually use it intelligently. So, we popped into our heads, somewhere around Newton and Descartes, and decided everything rational was the only thing that made sense, and proceeded to create nonsense and death and destruction and chaos ever since. And because the presumption and arrogance is that somehow thinking makes sense and is rational in the face of the complexity of the natural world and the reality we live in, which is way beyond any cognitive event horizon we can handle. And because 50% of it has nothing to do with thinking or understanding, it has to do with experiencing and feeling and touching and responding and sensing. So for me, we're in a rainy Sunday place as a species of our own making, because we can't seem to get out from under our own cognitive chaos and ability to fuck up our world, pardon my French. And David Bohm talked about this idea that, every time we identify a new problem and figure out a new solution, the new solution is the birth of the next problem that we have to figure out the new solution. And it's like this hamster wheel. Like, what the hell are we doing? Nature has it all worked out. It's perfect. Everybody, everybody manages and figures out their place and their survival and, their life cycle. And, a friend of mine, Bernie Krause, his thesis, PhD thesis, was the niche hypothesis, which is, why do the particular array of creatures in a particular ecosystem end up living there together? And what he figured out was that they come along, and what they do is they look for a place where their frequency of communication was available. So that if they set up shop there, they could hear each other. And they could coordinate for chorusing to save each other from predators. And they could hear each other for mating and connecting and getting together and being community. And like, nature has all of this stuff figured out. And we're going to do better. We're going to do, like, what? What? So that's my orientation around these three pieces.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to add to that, aren't we, this species, human being, doing the same thing as part of nature, figuring out where we are and what we are doing, only in a different way as the animals, because, the animals and plants, they figure out where the best way to live, but many of them die in between, and somebody survives and then figures out, oh, this is the right place for this plant. As you said before, the fire plant, no? Then it comes at the right moment. And we do that too, but we pretend that our evolution needs to be without pain and without death and without I don't know what, And I think there is the main error we are doing, because we are so conscious of ourselves. We don't want to die, and I don't, and I don't like death and dealing with death, and we have to. But
we're guaranteed to create that which we fear the most. So
sure.
And I think you're right, if we're worried about death, we're killing ourselves and each other at amazing rates with ever increasing efficiency.
Yeah. But the animals do that too in a certain, or the plants in a certain, the weeds here, when I have my garden and the weeds come in and kill the other plants, which I would like to have. So I don't think we are very much different from natural processes, only that we have the self-reflection thing, that we know about it. But we are trying to figure out in the chaos which is existing, also in our minds, but in the all rest of what we have, we are trying to figure out as nature does, and we are part of nature. Only we cannot pretend that it is going without, let's say, individual damage, because we are individuals. Animals are not really individuals. If there is a hedgehog on the street squeezed by a car, yeah, okay, there are other hedgehogs. And we think for humans must be different. And I think there is the pain coming in.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I think part of that is we're not different. We're not alone. And the current cognitive, patriarchal, industrial package had an interest in making us experience ourselves as alone, but we're not. We're just not.
Don't be so negative with that, because otherwise we couldn't talk together if we didn't have these things. There are many good things in the development of technology and what you call patriarchal stuff, which I sort of contest a little bit, because in my opinion, in patriarchy, we women have contributed and had our good time in patriarchy. Now we have to go out and work for ourselves. And it's not the husband anymore doing. Now it's even the other way around. I had a husband who wanted me to pay for him, and I thought, So I want to say we women had a big interest in living in the way we lived before. So when I hear now all the accusations of patriarchy, I get.
So we haven't figured it out yet, but we're working on it. But it must somehow be helpful that we're sitting here reflecting about it, since that's something we apparently are able to do. This was an hour. How did you think this went? Our little game of three rather random kinds of things. What did you think about our conversation and what we got out of it?
Well, I think it definitely stirred. You know, I could feel the stir. So yeah, it was great. And it also makes you go deeper into what's been shared from different perspectives without being the tyrant, which I appreciate. And because sometimes we can get so locked into our own ideas and our own perceptions and our own experiences that when somebody else shares, not to identify it becomes difficult. So I appreciate this. Thank you.
I like the fact with these always coming back to these three, let's say, items. So you have a certain framework of where you put your thoughts into. And this is sometimes surprising what comes out of it. So while I was thinking, you know, and speaking, I thought, oh, probably in another context, I would have said this differently, or maybe even didn't say it at all. So I liked it a lot, this conversation. I would love to do that more often.
Yeah, I thought that I really liked it too. I thought at some point in it that, okay, are we running out of steam on this one? There's no more rocket fuel. I thought, should we change to something else? But then it actually got better afterwards by sort of sticking with it. We got deeper and it became more meaningful. I mean, I really didn't pick these things because I thought that somehow was relevant or something. It was rather random, whatever random is. But so I was happy that we actually got some nice meat on it. I enjoyed it.
It seemed a lot shorter than an hour. That's usually for me a sign of enjoyment. It went by pretty fast, given the constraint of the setup.
Yeah, I thought that went rather quickly. So yeah, we could go on and play several more rounds, but we'll do that another time maybe. But I like also, I think this works well. I mean, it becomes certainly at least as meaningful as if we had picked a serious topic. I mean, it's no less serious. It rather gives a certain freedom in triangulating it with some odd choices of pieces. Everything fits with everything else, obviously, and actually letting go of the serious topic allows us maybe more freedom in getting somewhere with it. Anyway, thank you very much for being part of the lovely experiment, and hope to see you another time. And Peter, I don't know if you're still there, Peter. If you are, say hello. If you're not, that's also fine. Thank you for being here anyway. All is good. So thank you, guys. Oh, yes, there you are.
I'm here, and thank you.
Thank you.
You are there, Peter. Hi.
Yes, just not public.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. It was lovely to have you here in one form or another. Anyway, we're done. Thank you for being here. See you again another time.
Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.
Aloha.